Picture a Roman city late at night. The sun has long since slipped below the horizon, and the streets are growing quiet. The clamor of merchants, the clatter of cart wheels, the barking of dogs, all have faded into a soft hush. Only a few oil lamps flicker here and there, casting small pools of amber light onto the cobblestones. The air cools, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and baked earth. And somewhere in the heart of the city, a great building still breathes. Its stone walls are warm to the touch, even now, long after the last bather has left. Steam rises from the vents in lazy curls, mingling with the night sky. This is the Roman bathhouse, a temple to water and heat, to relaxation and community. But while the wealthy and the weary have gone home to their beds, another world stirs within these walls. The workers remain. They are the ones who keep the fires burning, the water flowing, the floors clean. They are the ones who live behind the steam and the stone. Imagine you are standing at the entrance of such a bathhouse, perhaps in the city of Rome itself, or in a far-flung provincial town like Pompeii or Bath. The building looms before you, a vast complex of domed halls, arched passageways, and deep, echoing pools. During the day, it was a riot of noise and activity, laughter, splashing, the scrape of strigils on oiled skin, the murmur of conversations that ranged from politics to poetry. But now, in the deep silence of the night, it feels like a sleeping giant. Only the soft hiss of steam and the occasional drip of water break the stillness. If you were to step inside, you would feel the residual heat clinging to the marble floors. The air is thick and heavy, laden with moisture, and the ghostly perfume of olive oil and rose petals. The great furnace, the hypocaust, still glows at the building's core, a hungry beast that must never be allowed to cool. And it is here, in this subterranean world of fire and ash, that we must begin our story. The workers of the Roman bathhouse were a hidden army, laboring in the shadows, while the citizens of the empire luxuriated above them. Among the most essential were the stokers, the men who fed the furnace. Their world was one of perpetual heat, soot, and strain. They worked in shifts, day and night, because the bathhouse had to be kept warm for the first customers who arrived at dawn. The hypocaust was a sophisticated system of underfloor heating, with hot air circulating through hollow brick pillars and clay pipes in the walls. But it required constant attention. Wood was the primary fuel, and vast piles of it were stacked in the furnace rooms, cut from forests that were slowly disappearing around the expanding empire. The stokers would toss log after log into the blazing mouth of the furnace, their faces lit by the hungry orange glow. Sweat poured from them in rivers. Their skin, permanently reddened and cracked, bore the marks of their trade. They wore little more than a loincloth, for any clothing would have been unbearable. And they worked in near darkness, with only the firelight to guide them. It was a brutal job, but it was also a skilled one. Too much heat, and the water in the baths would scald. Too little, and the gentle warmth prized by bathers would dissipate. The stokers learned the moods of the furnace as if it were a living creature, knowing just when to add fuel and when to let it rest. Beyond beyond the stokers were the water carriers, the ones who ensured that the baths were always filled and refreshed. The aqueducts brought water into the city, but it had to be channeled into the bathhouses, many pools, the cold frigidarium, the warm tepidarium, the hot caldarium. These pools were enormous, some holding thousands of gallons. The water carriers, often slaves or low-paid freedmen, would operate the valves and sluices, directing the flow from the lead pipes that snaked through the walls. They would also scrub the pools, draining and refilling them regularly to keep the water clear. Imagine the sound of water echoing in the vaulted chamber, the splash and ripple as it poured from bronze spouts shaped like lions or dolphins. The carriers worked in the damp, their feet perpetually wet, their hands wrinkled from constant immersion. They knew the temperature of every pool by heart, dipping a finger in to test it, adjusting the hot and cold supplies with practiced ease. And they were also the ones who, in the deepest hours of the night, would replenish the oil and perfumes that bathers used. Large clay amphorae of olive oil were stored in cool cellars, alongside jars of scented essences, lavender, myrrh, cinnamon. The carriers would pour these into stone basins, mixing them into the water, or leaving them in small flasks for the bather's own use. It was a quiet, methodical work, the kind that left little trace in history. But without it, the bathhouse would have been a barren place. Then there were the attendants, the ones who served the bathers directly. They were a varied group. The capsare, who watched over the clothes and valuables of the patrons, the unctors, who applied oil and performed massages, the tractators, who scraped the oil and dirt from the skin with strigils, and the cicerei, who offered refreshments like cold drinks or small snacks. These workers were on their feet for hours, moving through the steamy haze, attending to the needs of the rich. Many were slaves, owned by the bathhouse itself, or leased from wealthy masters. Their lives were not their own. They had to be ever attentive, ever polite, even when dealing with rude or demanding customers. A slave who dropped a valuable strigil or spilled wine on a senator's tunic could face severe punishment. Yet, within the walls of the bathhouse, a strange sort of democracy sometimes emerged. Here, a slave and a free citizen might share the same hot pool, their bodies equal in the steam. The attendants heard everything, the gossip, the secrets, the complaints about the emperor. They were invisible in plain sight, part of the furniture of the bathhouse. And when the last bather left, they too collapsed into their own small quarters, often in the basements or in cramped rooms above the furnace. They slept on simple mats, surrounded by the constant warmth, lulled by the distant hiss of steam. But the bathhouse was not just a place of work, it was also a home. Many workers lived on the premises, especially those who were slaves or had no family in the city. Their living conditions were modest, but they were not without their comforts. The constant heat meant they rarely felt cold, even in winter. The water was plentiful for washing, and there was a sense of camaraderie among the staff, a shared purpose that bound them together. They would gather after hours in the furnace room, eating simple meals of bread, olives, and fish sauce, telling stories, complaining about their masters, or singing the bawdy songs that were popular in the taverns. The warm stone floor was their bench, the glow of the fire their lamp. Some would sneak a dip in the baths when no one was watching, a forbidden pleasure that tasted all the sweeter for being stolen. The head attendant, often a senior slave or freedman, would turn a blind eye as long as the work was done. These nightly moments were precious. They were a small oasis of freedom in lives that were heavily regulated. Let us pause now and consider a particular character, a man named Lucius, who worked as a stoker in a bathhouse near the Forum of Trajan. He was born into slavery, brought to Rome from Gaul as a child. He had no memory of his parents, only the heat of the furnace that had become his entire world. He started as a water carrier, but his strength and endurance earned him a promotion to the hypocaust. By the time he was 30, he knew the furnace better than he knew his own face. He could tell by the sound of the roar whether the fire was burning too fast or too slow. He could read the temperature by the color of the coals, a dull red for the gentle warmth of the tepidarium, a bright orange for the fierce heat of the caldarium. He worked 12-hour shifts, his body moving in a rhythm as old as fire itself. And in the quiet moments, when the furnace was satisfied and the building was asleep, he would sit by the vent that opened into the caldarium, feeling the steam on his face, and he would think of nothing. It was a kind of meditation, a surrender to the heat. Lucius never complained. He had no one to complain to. But sometimes, when the moon was high and the city was silent, he would whisper stories to himself in the language of his homeland, words that no one around him could understand. The furnace listened, and it was enough. The lives of these workers were intertwined with the very structure of the bathhouse. They knew every crack in the marble, every loose floorboard, every spot where the plaster was peeling. They were the ones who made repairs, who patched leaks, who replaced broken tiles. They hauled buckets of water to cool the hot stones after a long day. They scrubbed the floors with vinegar to kill the mold that grew in the damp. They polished the bronze fittings until they gleamed like gold. And they did all of this with a quiet efficiency, unnoticed by the patrons who strolled through the halls in their fine linens. The bathhouse was a stage, and the workers were the stagehands, moving behind the scenes to keep the illusion alive. Without them, the steam would cease, the water would go cold, and the great experiment of Roman public bathing would collapse into a heap of silent, dusty stone. As the night wears on, the workers begin their final rounds. The furnace is banked for the night, its hungry mouth closed with a heavy iron door. The last of the water is drained from the pools, leaving them echoing and empty. The attendants pick up discarded towels, forgotten sandals, a stray coin that has rolled into a corner. They check the oil lamps, trimming wicks and refilling the clay reservoirs. The smell of burnt olive oil mingles with the steam. Somewhere, a dog barks in the distance. And then, one by one, the workers retreat to their sleeping quarters. The last lamp is extinguished. The bathhouse is dark and still. but the stone walls still hold the warmth, a gentle animal heat that will radiate through the night. The workers sleep, wrapped in thin blankets, their bodies marked by their labor's calloused hands, cracked feet, a permanent tan from the fire. They dream of nothing, or perhaps of Gaul, or of the sea, or of a day when they will no longer be slaves. The steam continues to rise from the vents, disappearing into the Roman sky, carrying with it the breath of 1,000 stories that will never be told. So here we are, in the quiet aftermath of another day in the life of the Roman bathhouse. We have only begun to scratch the surface of these hidden lives. In the segments to come, we will explore the barbers who trimmed beards with sharp razors, the masseurs who worked the knots from tired muscles, the women who served in the women's baths, and the children who ran errands through the steamy corridors. We will learn about the tools of their trade, the wages they earned or failed to earn, and the small rebellions they waged against the system that held them. But for now, let us linger in this silent space, with the warmth of the stone beneath our feet and the ghost of steam on our skin. Let us remember that behind every great empire, there are those who stoke the fires, who carry the water, who scrub the floors. They are the ones who make the luxury possible, and their lives, though unrecorded in the grand histories, are no less worthy of our attention. Close your eyes if you wish. Let the heat of Rome settle around you, and know that, in the darkness of the night, the bathhouse workers are sleeping, and the furnace is dreaming of dawn. And so, as the furnace dreams of dawn, the night grows deeper still. The city of Rome, that great marble beast, settles into a restless slumber. The streets grow quiet, save for the occasional footfall of a night watchman or the distant bark of a dog. In the bathhouse, the silence is thick and warm, like a blanket woven from steam and stone. The workers lie on their mats, their breathing slow and even. Some snore softly. Others twitch in their sleep, their hands still moving as if stoking the fire or scrubbing a floor. The darkness is absolute, except for a single crack of moonlight that slips through a high window, falling across a forgotten strigil left on a bench. The bathhouse is a cathedral of heat, and the workers are its silent congregation. When the first light of morning begins to creep over the Palatine Hill, the furnace stirs. It is not a sudden awakening, but a gradual rousing, like a great beast turning in its sleep. The stokers, those who have slept nearest to the heat, are the first to rise. They are used to the dark, to the warmth, to the smell of ash and old oil. They move quietly, not wanting to disturb the others who still dream. One of them, a man named Marcus, has been a stoker for 20 years. He knows the furnace like an old friend. He opens the iron door and peers inside, checking the embers. They are still glowing, a deep, sullen red. He adds a few logs, carefully, lovingly, and the fire begins to breathe again. The first hiss of steam rises from the pipes. The day is beginning. The other workers stir as the warmth increases. The capsare, the clothes watchers, rub their eyes and stretch their aching backs. They have slept on thin mats, but the stone floor is not forgiving. They rise and fold their blankets, tucking them into small niches in the wall. There is no breakfast for most of them, not yet. They will eat later, after the first patrons arrive, but some have a small stash of bread saved from the previous evening. They chew in silence, looking at the floor, their minds still half asleep. The women who work in the women's baths rise separately in a different quarter of the building. They are fewer in number, but their work is just as demanding. They attend to the wives of senators, the daughters of merchants, the freedwomen who have earned enough to afford a warm pool. They hear different secrets, softer complaints, the whispers of love affairs and household quarrels. Their lives are quieter, but no less confined. One of these women is named Flavia, a slave from Greece. She was brought to Rome as a young girl and sold to the bathhouse owner, a wealthy freedman named Gaius. Flavia is a tractatrix, a female masseuse who works with oils and strigils. She is skilled, her hands strong and knowing. She can work a knot out of a shoulder with a few precise movements. The women who come to her trust her, sometimes too much. They tell her things they would never tell their husbands. Flavia listens, and she nods, and she never repeats what she hears. It is not loyalty exactly, but survival. In the bathhouse, silence is a kind of currency. She knows that one careless word could bring ruin, so she keeps her thoughts to herself, and she rubs the oil into tired skin, and she dreams of a house by the sea, a house she will never own. The barbers begin their day later, when the sun is fully up. They set up their stools in a corner of the apoditerium, the changing room where the light is good. They have sharp razors and bowls of warm water. Their clients are mostly men, though some women also come for a trim or for the removal of unwanted hair. The barber's work is delicate and dangerous. A slip of the blade can mean a cut, a scar, a loss of trust. The best barbers are artists, and they take pride in their craft. They chat with their customers, telling jokes, sharing gossip. They are the newsmongers of the bathhouse. If you wanted to know what the emperor had said at dinner the night before, you asked the barber. He had heard it from someone who had heard it from someone else, and the story grew a little with each telling. But it was entertaining, and that was what mattered. The barber's chair was a small stage, and he was the performer. Among the barbers was a man named Julius, a freedman who had earned his liberty after 25 years of service. He now rented a small room above a bakery, but he still worked in the bathhouse, saving every coin he could. He was a careful man, not given to laughter. He had seen too much of the world's cruelty to be easily amused. But when he shaved a customer's face, he was gentle. He used a soft touch, a steady hand. He knew that for a few moments, the man in his chair was vulnerable, trusting him with the blade. He took that trust seriously. And sometimes, after the customer left, Julius would wipe the razor clean and think about his own face in the mirror, the stubble that grew each day, the lines that deepened each year. He wondered if anyone would ever shave him with such care. Probably not. But he did not dwell on it. He had work to do. The children of the bathhouse are a separate story. They are the errand runners, the water carriers, the sweepers of floors. They are the smallest and the most invisible. They dart between the legs of adults, carrying towels, fetching oil, emptying basins. They are often orphans or the children of slaves, born into the world of the bathhouse. They know no other life. They play in the steam, chasing each other through the tepidarium, their laughter echoing off the marble. The patrons sometimes toss them a coin or a piece of fruit. The attendants scold them when they are too loud. But the children are the heart of the bathhouse, its hidden pulse. They grow up fast, their childhood consumed by the heat and the noise. By the time they are 12, they are already working full shifts. Their hands are calloused, their eyes are old. But sometimes, late at night, when the baths are empty, they gather in the furnace room and tell each other stories, stories of monsters under the aqueducts, of ghosts that haunt the cold pools, of a treasure buried beneath the floor of the caldarium. They believe these stories, or they pretend to, and that is enough. The tools of these workers are simple but essential. The strigil, a curved metal blade used to scrape oil and dirt from the skin. The strigil is made of bronze or iron, sometimes silver for the wealthy. The tractatters keep their strigils sharp, honing them on small stones. A dull strigil can tear the skin. A sharp one glides smoothly, leaving the skin clean and tingling. Then there is the oil, usually olive oil, sometimes scented with herbs like rosemary or lavender. The unctors pour the oil from small flasks made of glass or clay. They work it into the skin with long, firm strokes. The oil is expensive, and the bathhouse owner keeps a careful count of every flask. The masseurs also use sponges, soft and natural, for washing the body. These are brought from Greece or from the coast of North Africa. They are soaked in warm water and squeezed out over the bather's back. The sound of water dripping onto stone is one of the most constant sounds in the bathhouse, like a soft, steady rain. The wages these workers earn or fail to earn are a matter of survival. Slaves receive no money, only food and shelter. Freedmen and free workers are paid a daily wage, usually a few sesterces, barely enough to buy bread and a little wine. Some workers supplement their income with tips from grateful patrons. A rich senator might toss a coin to Capsarius, who watched his clothes especially carefully. A woman might give a small gift to her favorite masseuse. These tips are precious, hoarded for the day when the worker might buy their freedom or simply afford a better meal. But tips are unpredictable. Some days, the patrons are generous. Other days, they are stingy or distracted. The workers learn to live with uncertainty, to save when they can, to go hungry when they must. It is a hard life, but it is a life. And then there are the small rebellions, not the grand uprisings, not the slave revolts that make the history books. Those are rare and bloody. The rebellions of the bathhouse workers are quiet and sly. A slave might steal a sip of wine from a patron's cup when no one is looking. A stoker might let the fire burn a little too hot, just to make the caldarium uncomfortable for a rude customer. A Capsarius might lose a valuable ring for a moment, just to give the owner a scare before finding it again. These are tiny acts of defiance, invisible to the masters, but deeply satisfying to the workers. They are a way of saying, I am still here. I still have my wits. You may own my body, but you do not own my spirit. The head attendant, the one who supervises the staff, often knows about these small rebellions, but chooses to ignore them. He was once a slave himself. He remembers. He understands that a little stolen pleasure is necessary for survival. As long as the work gets done, as long as the patrons are satisfied, he looks the other way. The women who serve in the women's baths have their own forms of rebellion. They whisper secrets to each other, sharing information about which patrons are kind and which are cruel. They have a code, a way of communicating without words. A certain tilt of the head means beware. A certain tap of the finger means she is a good tipper. They protect each other. When a new slave arrives, frightened and unsure, the older women take her under their wing. They teach her the ropes, how to apply oil, how to read a patron's mood, how to avoid the owner's wrath. They share their food with her, their blankets, their stories. In this way, a community is formed, a family that has nothing to do with blood. The bathhouse becomes a home, albeit a strange one, with floors that never cool and walls that sweat. As the morning deepens, the first patrons begin to arrive. The workers snap into their roles. The capsarai take the cloaks and tunics, hanging them on wooden pegs or storing them in small cubbies. The unctors prepare their oils. The stokers feed the furnace. The barbers sharpen their razors. The children scurry with fresh towels. The bathhouse comes alive, filling with the sound of voices, the splash of water, the hiss of steam. The workers move like dancers, their motions practiced and smooth. They do not look at each other. They do not smile. They are professionals. But beneath the surface, there is a current of shared knowledge. They all know the secrets of this place. They all know the cracks in the marble, the temperament of the furnace, the moods of the patrons. They are the true owners of the bathhouse, in a way that the wealthy owner, Gaius, will never understand. He owns the building. They own the life inside it. And so the day passes, as it always does. The sun climbs high, then begins its slow descent. The steam rises, the oil flows, the strigils scrape. The workers grow tired, but they do not stop. They cannot stop. The bathhouse demands constant attention. A fire that is not stoked will die. A pool that is not cleaned will grow foul. A patron who is not attended to will complain. The work is endless, and the workers are the ones who bear it. They are the ones who keep the great machine running. And when the last patron finally leaves, when the sun has set and the lamps are lit, they will begin their final rounds, their quiet rituals of closure. They will bank the fire. They will drain the pools. They will clean the floors. And then, at last, they will collapse onto their mats, their bodies aching, their minds empty, and they will sleep. They will sleep the deep, dreamless sleep of the exhausted, and the furnace will keep its lonely vigil, waiting for the dawn. And the furnace will keep its lonely vigil, waiting for the dawn. But dawn is still hours away. In the darkness of the bathhouse, the workers settle into their sleeping quarters. These are not luxurious rooms. They are small, cramped spaces, often located in the basement or behind the main halls. There are no windows. The air is thick with the smell of damp stone and smoke, but it is familiar, almost comforting after a long day. The workers lie on thin mats stuffed with straw, their bodies pressed close together for warmth. They cover themselves with rough woolen blankets, the same kind used to dry the patrons after a bath. The blankets are worn thin in places, but they are enough. The workers are used to making do with little. In the corner of the sleeping chamber, an old woman named Helena sits with her back against the wall. She is the eldest of the female workers, her face lined with decades of steam and toil. She does not sleep much anymore, not like she used to. Instead, she watches over the others, her eyes half closed, her breathing slow. She hums a tune, a song from her childhood, something about the sea and a fisherman's daughter. The younger women listen to her hum, their bodies relaxing into the rhythm. The song is a thread that connects them to something beyond the bathhouse, to a world of waves and wind and open sky. They have never seen the sea. They were born in the city, in the narrow alleyways and crowded tenements. In Helena's humming, they can almost feel the salt spray on their faces. It is a small gift, but it is precious. The men's sleeping chamber is across the hall. There, the stoker Marcus lies on his mat, staring at the ceiling. His body aches from the day's work, his muscles heavy and sore. He thinks about the furnace, the way it breathed like a living thing. He thinks about the fire, the way it danced and consumed. He has learned to respect the fire, to read its moods. A low, steady flame means a calm day. A high, hungry flame means trouble. A patron who demands the hottest water. A child who throws a wood chip into the grate just to see it catch. Marcus has learned to anticipate these things. He is good at his job. But at night, lying on his mat, he wonders if there is more to life than wood and ash and heat. He wonders what it would be like to feel the cold, really feel it, not just the chill of a winter morning, but the deep, pure cold of a mountain stream or a snow-covered field. He has never left the city. He has never seen a mountain. The idea is strange and beautiful, and he holds it in his mind like a secret treasure, turning it over and over until sleep finally takes him. In another corner of the men's chamber, a young boy named Lucius curls into a tight ball. He is one of the water carriers, the ones who fetch buckets from the well and haul them to the bathhouse's storage tanks. His arms are strong for his age, his shoulders broad from years of carrying. But his mind is still a child's mind, full of dreams and fears. He listens to the sounds of the night, the drip of water somewhere in the plumbing, the scratch of a rat behind the wall, the distant barking of a dog. He tells himself that the monsters under the aqueducts are not real. He knows they are not real, but knowing does not stop him from pulling the blanket over his head and whispering a prayer to the household gods, the little statues that sit in a niche in the wall. He prays for protection, for a safe night, for a morning when the water is not too heavy and the sun is not too hot. He prays for a piece of bread with honey, a rare treat that sometimes appears when a patron is in a generous mood. He falls asleep still praying, his lips moving even as his breathing slows. The bathhouse at night is a different place. The steam has settled. The pools are still. The only light comes from a single oil lamp left burning in the atrium. its flame flickering behind a glass shield. The shadows are long and soft, moving slowly as the lamp sways in a draught. The marble floors, so carefully polished during the day, now reflect the lamp's glow in a dim, watery sheen. The silence is deep, broken only by the occasional creak of settling stone or the faint gurgle of water in the pipes. It is a peaceful silence, the kind that wraps around you like a heavy blanket. But even in the silence, the bathhouse is alive. The furnace still breathes, though the fire is low now, just embers glowing red under a layer of ash. The stoker Marcus tends it one last time before he sleeps, adding a few pieces of wood to keep it going through the night. The heat radiates through the walls, warming the sleeping chambers, keeping the cold at bay. The workers would not survive a winter without the furnace. It is their sun, their hearth, their heart. They sleep close to it, their bodies turned toward the warmth like flowers toward the light. The Capsarius, a freedman named Gaius, not the owner, another Gaius, a common name, lies awake for a while, thinking about the day's events. He remembers a patron who was particularly anxious about his belongings, a nervous young man who kept checking his pouch every few minutes. Gaius had reassured him, speaking in a calm, steady voice, and eventually the man relaxed and enjoyed his bath. That is the way of it. The job of a Capsarius is not just to guard clothes, but to guard peace of mind. He is part sentinel, part therapist. He watches for thieves, of course, but he also watches for worry, for the furrowed brow and the restless eye. A good Capsarius knows how to soothe without words, how to stand just close enough to be present, but not so close as to be intrusive. It is a subtle art, and Gaius is proud of his skill. He was a slave once, and now he is a freedman, earning his own coin, sleeping in a room that is not his own, but is at least his to sleep in. It is not much, but it is progress. He dreams of one day opening a small shop, a place where he can sell the woven baskets his wife makes. But that is far off. For now, there is the bathhouse, and there is sleep, and there is the quiet satisfaction of a job done well. In the women's chamber, a masseuse named Livia lies next to her friend Octavia. They whisper to each other in the dark, their voices low so as not to wake the others. They talk about the day, about the patrons, about the small triumphs and frustrations. Livia tells Octavia about a woman who came in with a terrible headache, her temples throbbing, her eyes tight with pain. Livia had worked her hands carefully, using lavender oil, pressing her thumbs along the woman's brow and temples. After a long, slow massage, the woman's headache faded, and she smiled for the first time all morning. That moment, that smile, is why Livia does this work. She does not do it for the money, though she needs the money. She does it for the feeling of giving relief, of being useful, of being good at something. Octavia understands. She is a hair plucker, a depilatrix, and she knows the intimacy of that work, the trust it requires. A woman who lets you touch her skin, who lets you remove her hair, is trusting you with something vulnerable. Octavia treats that trust with care. She talks to her patrons as she works, telling them stories, distracting them from the small stings. She has learned that a joke can make the pain disappear faster than any ointment. She is funny, Octavia. She can make even the grumpiest senator's wife laugh. It is a talent, a gift. They continue whispering, their voices growing softer as sleep pulls at them. They talk about the winter, about the cold that seeps through the walls, about the need for an extra blanket. They talk about the food in the kitchen, the stale bread and thin porridge that is their nightly meal. They talk about a rumor, heard from a patron, that the emperor is planning a new building project, something grand, something that might bring more work to the city. More work means more patrons, more tips, more hope. But they do not build their hopes too high. They have learned that hope is a fragile thing, easily broken. Instead, they focus on the present, on the warmth of the mat beneath them, on the sound of each other's breathing, on the certainty that tomorrow will come, and with it, another day of work. And as the night deepens, the bathhouse itself seems to breathe. The water in the pipes cools slowly. The stone walls sweat, releasing the heat they have absorbed during the day. The air grows still and heavy, laden with the scent of damp earth and ancient brick. It is a scent that has been in this building for centuries, since the first brick was laid, since the first fire was lit. The bathhouse is old, older than anyone remembers. It was built in the time of Augustus, some say, or maybe even earlier. The workers do not know its history. They only know its present, its daily rhythms, its secrets and sounds. In the women's chamber, Helena stirs. Her humming has stopped. She is asleep now, her head tilted to one side, her mouth slightly open. She dreams of the sea she has never seen. In her dream, she is standing on a shore, the waves lapping at her feet. The sand is golden and warm. The sky is vast and blue. She feels a freedom she has never known, a lightness in her body, a joy in her heart. The dream is a gift, a brief escape from the weight of her life. She will wake in a few hours, her joints aching, her throat dry, but the memory of the dream will stay with her, a small flame of hope in the darkness. She will hold on to it as she works, as she pours oil and scrapes skin, as she endures the endless steam. The dream is her secret treasure, her private sea. The night passes slowly, as it always does when you are waiting for dawn. But dawn does come, as it always does. The first light creeps through the cracks in the shutters, gray and weak, but enough to stir the workers from their sleep. They wake one by one, groaning, stretching, rubbing their eyes. The children wake first, their bodies restless, eager for the day. The stoker Marcus wakes second, his mind already turning to the furnace. He stumbles to the grate, checks the embers, adds more wood. The fire crackles to life, the heat spreading through the halls. The water in the tanks begins to warm. The bathhouse stirs, stretching its stone limbs, readying itself for another day. Livia wakes and washes her face with a damp cloth. Octavia combs her hair with her fingers. The old woman Helena opens her eyes, blinks, and begins her humming again, the same song from her childhood. The young boy Lucius bounds out of his mat, his fears forgotten, his energy renewed. The Capsarius Gaius adjusts his tunic, straightens his posture, and prepares to greet the first patrons. The workers gather in the kitchen for their morning meal, a small piece of bread, a cup of watered wine, a handful of olives. They eat quickly, silently, each lost in their own thoughts. Then they scatter to their posts, ready to begin the cycle again. The cycle never ends. That is the nature of the bathhouse. It is a machine that must be fed and tended, a creature that must be kept warm and clean. The workers are its caretakers, its priests, its slaves. They give it their strength, their time, their lives. In return, it gives them shelter, purpose, a place in the world. It is a cruel trade, but it is the only trade they know. And in the liminal hours, between night and day, between sleep and work, there is a moment of quiet, a moment of peace. The steam rises, the water ripples, the fire glows. The workers stand or sit or lie still, and for a moment they are not workers, not slaves, not freedmen. They are just people breathing in the warmth, feeling the pulse of the great stone body around them. They are part of the bathhouse, and the bathhouse is part of them. It is a strange union, a bittersweet marriage, but it is theirs, and it is enough. And so the morning begins, not with a grand announcement or a clanging bell, but with the soft whisper of water moving through pipes, the quiet crackle of fresh wood catching flame, the shuffle of tired feet on worn stone floors. The bathhouse awakens slowly, like an old man rising from a deep sleep, joints creaking, breath misting in the cool air. The first light seeps through the high windows, pale and watery, casting long shadows across the mosaic floors. In the caldarium, the hot room, the steam has not yet gathered. The walls are still cool to the touch, the bronze basins empty, the marble benches waiting. It will take hours for the heat to build, for the room to become the sweaty, hazy sanctuary that patrons will seek later in the day. For now, it is quiet, expectant, patient. A young slave named Phoebe moves through the corridors, a bundle of clean linen under her arm. She is barely 12 years old, her hair tied back with a strip of leather, her feet bare against the cold stone. She has been working in the bathhouse for 3 years now, ever since her mother died and her father sold her to the bathhouse owner to pay off a debt. She does not remember much of her life before the bathhouse, only fragments. A small room with a clay floor, the smell of lentil soup, her mother's voice singing a lullaby. Those memories are fading, like old frescoes losing their color. The bathhouse is her life now. She knows every corridor, every niche, every crack in the plaster. She knows which stones are loose and which pipes groan when the water first rushes through. She knows the moods of the workers, the habits of the patrons, the rhythm of the day. She is a child, but she carries the knowledge of an old woman. Phoebe pads softly to the apoditerium, the changing room, where the first patrons will soon arrive. She places fresh linens on the wooden shelves, smoothing them with her small hands. She checks the cubbyholes for any forgotten items, a sandal, a comb, a small pouch of coins. Nothing today. She straightens a bench that has been knocked slightly askew. She wipes a smudge from a marble column with the hem of her tunic. These small acts of care are her offering to the day. She does them without thinking, her body moving on its own, her mind drifting elsewhere. She thinks about the breakfast she ate, a piece of bread dipped in olive oil, a handful of dried figs. It was enough. It is always enough, barely. She is used to hunger, but she does not dwell on it. Hunger is just another sensation, like the cold of the floor or the warmth of the steam. It is part of the texture of her life. From the furnace room, she hears the stoker Marcus humming. It is a low, tuneless sound, but comforting. He always hums when he works, a habit he picked up from his father, who was a stoker before him. The furnace is his domain, a dark, sooty cave where the fire never dies. He feeds it with wood and charcoal, tending it like a living thing. The furnace is the heart of the bathhouse. If it stops, everything stops. The water will cool, the steam will vanish, the patrons will leave. Marcus knows this. He feels the weight of it in his shoulders, in the smoke that clings to his skin, in the heat that never leaves his bones. He is a man of few words. He prefers the company of the fire to the chatter of people. The fire is honest. It asks only for fuel, and it gives heat in return. No complaints, no demands, no lies. Marcus respects that. Phoebe finishes in the apoditerium and moves to the tepidarium, the warm room. This is the middle space, the room where bodies adjust to the heat, where conversations soften and muscles begin to relax. The floor is heated by hypocausts, channels of hot air running beneath the tiles. The warmth rises slowly, gently, like a blanket being pulled over the world. Phoebe loves this room. It is the calmest, the quietest. The walls are painted with faded scenes of dolphins and sea creatures, their colors muted by decades of steam. The benches are curved, inviting you to sit and wait. She sometimes imagines herself as one of those dolphins, gliding through warm waters, free and untroubled. It is a foolish thought, she knows. She is not a dolphin. She is a slave. But for a moment, standing in the warm room, she can pretend. The door to the street creaks open. The first patron has arrived. Phoebe straightens her posture, pulls her shoulders back, and prepares to do her work. The patron is an old man, his face weathered and gray, his tunic threadbare. He carries a small bundle of belongings and walks with a cane. He nods at Phoebe, a brief, weary gesture. She nods back. She knows his name is Lucius, not the young boy from earlier, but a different Lucius, a retired carpenter who comes to the baths every morning because his joints ache and the warm water brings him relief. He is poor, but he pays his fee with a handful of coins saved from odd jobs. He is not a wealthy man, but the bathhouse does not turn him away. The owner knows that even a poor customer is better than none. Lucius shuffles to the changing room, and Phoebe follows, ready to help him if he needs it. He does not ask for help. He is proud, like many old men. He undresses slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. Phoebe waits, silent, respectful. When he is ready, he hands her his tunic, and she hangs it on a hook. He enters the warm room, and she watches him lower himself onto a bench, sighing with the relief of the heat. She turns away, her job done for the moment. More patrons trickle in as the morning progresses. A young mother with a crying infant, hoping the warm water will soothe the baby's colic. a merchant with a heavy purse, talking loudly about his latest trade deal. A pair of friends, laughing about something that happened the night before. Each one brings their own story, their own need, their own burden. The workers meet them with a practiced calm, a gentle efficiency. The masseuse Livia is already in the women's chamber, her hands coated in oil, ready to knead away the tension from the day. The hair plucker Octavia is setting out her tools, a row of bronze tweezers and small pots of ointment. The Capsarius Gaius stands near the entrance, his eyes scanning the crowd, his posture alert but relaxed. He sees a man fumbling with his money pouch, looking nervous, and moves closer, not to threaten, but to reassure. The man relaxes, finds his coins, pays his fee. Gaius nods, a small smile. Another day, another small victory. In the kitchens, the cook Vibia is preparing the midday meal for the workers. She has a pot of barley simmering over a low flame, with a few scraps of pork and some dried herbs. It is not much, but it will fill their stomachs. She also prepares special dishes for the wealthy patrons who stay for hours: roasted dormice drizzled with honey, small cakes stuffed with dates, wine mixed with spices. The aroma drifts through the corridors, mixing with the steam, creating a strange, intoxicating blend. The workers catch the smell and their mouths water, but they know they must wait. The patrons come first, always the patrons. Phoebe moves through the bathhouse, checking the water levels in the pools, wiping condensation from mirrors, adjusting the shuttered windows to let in just enough light. She is everywhere and nowhere, a quiet presence in the background. She overhears snatches of conversation: a woman complaining about her husband, a man boasting about his new horse, a child asking for a sweet. She hears the laughter of friends, the sighs of relaxation, the occasional cough or sneeze. The bathhouse is a living organism, a body of many parts, and she is one of its smallest but most essential cells. She does not mind. She has learned to find comfort in the routine, in the predictability of the day. The only uncertainty is the whim of the patrons, the occasional argument or accident, but those are rare. Most days are the same, and sameness is a kind of safety. The old man Lucius finishes his bath and returns to the changing room. Phoebe helps him into his tunic, his movements slower now, his shoulders more relaxed. He presses a small coin into her hand, a tip. She bows her head in thanks. The coin is warm from his palm. She will save it, add it to the small hoard she keeps hidden under a loose tile in the corner of the storage room. She does not know what she is saving for. Freedom is a dream too distant to imagine. But the coin is a promise, a tiny piece of hope. She tucks it into the fold of her belt and continues her rounds. The sun climbs higher in the sky, and the bathhouse fills with steam and heat and noise. The workers move faster now, carrying water, wiping floors, refilling oil lamps. The stoker Marcus adds more logs to the furnace, sweat pouring down his face. The fire roars, and the water in the pipes sizzles. In the caldarium, the hot room is thick with vapor, obscuring the shapes of the bathers. They lounge on marble benches, their bodies glistening, their voices muffled. A young slave boy walks through with a basket of strigils. The curved metal scrapers used to remove oil and sweat from the skin. He offers them to patrons who nod or wave him away. He is a slight, pale boy, his eyes downcast. He has been in the bathhouse for only a few months, and he is still learning the ways, still adjusting to the heat and the constant movement. Sometimes he feels dizzy, overwhelmed, but he does not complain. Complaining does not help. He just endures. Phoebe sees him and feels a pang of recognition. She remembers her own first months, the confusion, the fatigue, the longing for a familiar face. She has no mother now, no father, but she has something else, the quiet solidarity of the other workers. The way Livia sometimes gives her a piece of bread from her own portion. The way Octavia lets her sit nearby while she works, telling her stories about the patrons. The way Marcus, gruff and silent, once fixed a loose sandal strap for her without a word. They are not a family, not in the way of blood, but they are a community, bound by the shared rhythm of the bathhouse. Phoebe knows that if she falls, they will pick her up, and if they fall, she will do the same. It is not a promise they have spoken aloud. It is a truth they live day after day, in the steam and the sweat, and the small, unspoken acts of kindness. The midday meal comes, and the workers take turns eating in the kitchen. Phoebe sits on a low stool, her bowl of barley stew resting on her knees. She eats slowly, savoring each spoonful. The cook Vibia sits across from her, chewing a piece of bread, her eyes distant. Vibia is a large woman with strong arms and a quiet dignity. She was a slave once, freed 2 years ago after the owner inherited her from his uncle. She could have left, could have found work elsewhere, but she stayed. The bathhouse is her home. She knows its needs, its quirks. She knows that the bread must be baked early, that the stew needs just a pinch of cumin to mask the bitterness of the cheap meat, that the wealthy patrons expect their wine to be served cool, not cold. She is a master of her domain, and she is content. Phoebe finishes her meal and washes her bowl in a basin of cold water. She has a few minutes of rest before the afternoon crowd arrives. She sits on the step of the warm room, her back against the wall, her eyes half closed. The warmth seeps into her bones, and for a moment she is not a slave, not a worker, not a child. She is just a body, breathing, resting, existing. The sound of water trickles from somewhere, a soothing, endless murmur. She could fall asleep here, right now, leaning against the worn stone. But she knows she cannot. The afternoon patrons will come soon, wealthy and demanding, their voices loud and their expectations high. She must be ready. And so the day continues, a slow procession of hours, each one marked by the gentle hiss of steam, the splash of water, the murmur of voices. The workers move through their tasks like dancers in a long, unending performance. They know their steps, their cues, their exits. They are part of the bathhouse, and the bathhouse is part of them. It is a strange union, a bittersweet marriage, but it is theirs, and it is enough. The afternoon rush descends like a slow tide, building gradually rather than crashing. The first to arrive are the merchants, their tunics still dusty from the forum, their voices carrying the sharp edges of negotiation. They come not just to wash, but to talk, to trade gossip, to seal deals in the steam. Phoebe watches them from the corner of the frigidarium, where she is refilling a small clay pot with scented oil. One man, stout and red-faced, gestures broadly as he describes a shipment of Egyptian linen. Another nods, his eyes half closed, but his mind clearly calculating. The bathhouse is their neutral ground, a place where rivals can meet without swords, where a shared dip in the warm pool can soften the hardest bargain. The workers know this. They move around them like water around stones, silent and accommodating. A woman enters with her personal slave, a young girl carrying a basket of towels and flasks of perfume. The woman is wealthy, her stola embroidered with gold thread, her hair piled high in an elaborate knot. She ignores the attendant at the door, walks straight to the warm room, and gestures for the slave to prepare a bench. The girl scurries, spreading a linen cloth, arranging the flasks. Phoebe sees the girl's hands tremble slightly. She is new, perhaps only a few weeks into her service. Phoebe feels a tug of sympathy, but she does not intervene. The wealthy woman is the kind who snaps her fingers and expects instant obedience. It is safer to stay invisible. In the caldarium, the heat is thick enough to taste. The stoker Marcus has just added another log, and the fire crackles with fresh hunger. A group of elderly men sit on the marble bench, their bodies sagging, their skin wrinkled and pale. They speak in low voices, reminiscing about the old days, about emperors long dead, about baths they visited in other cities. One of them, a former centurion named Titus, has a scar running from his temple to his jaw. He tells a story about a campaign in Germania, how the cold there was so bitter that the soldiers would huddle around small fires, dreaming of the baths back home. Now he sits in the heat, his eyes closed, his lips moving silently. Perhaps he is giving thanks. Perhaps he is just remembering. Phoebe brings a fresh supply of strigils to the warm room, placing them in a basket near the door. The young slave boy, whose name is Aulus, is already there, his face flushed, his thin arms trembling from carrying water. He looks at her with a pleading expression, but he does not speak. She understands. She reaches into her belt and pulls out a small piece of dried fig left over from her midday meal. She presses it into his palm, and his eyes widen. He pops it into his mouth quickly, chewing with desperate gratitude. She says nothing, just touches his shoulder briefly, then moves on. Small kindnesses are the currency of their world, and she has learned to spend them wisely. The afternoon deepens, and the light through the high windows shifts from white to amber. The workers begin to prepare for the evening rush, the time when the bathhouse becomes a place of social gathering, of dinner parties and late-night conversations. The cook Vibia is already roasting a young pig, the skin crackling, the smell drifting through the corridors. The masseuse Livia has finished with her last client and is wiping her hands on a cloth, her fingers swollen from hours of kneading. She sits down heavily on a bench, and Phoebe brings her a cup of watered wine. Livia nods, takes a long drink, and closes her eyes. She is older now, past 40, and every year the work feels heavier. but she does not complain. Complaining is a luxury she cannot afford. Octavia, the hair plucker, is still at work, her tweezers gleaming in the lamplight. She is attending to a young woman who is preparing for a wedding feast. The woman winces as each hair is pulled, but she endures it with a brave face. Octavia talks softly, telling her stories about her own wedding years ago, when she was a free woman in a small town in Campania. She had a husband, a farmer, and a small house with a garden. But the husband died, and the debts grew, and she sold herself into slavery to pay them. It is a common story, repeated in 1,000 variations across the empire. Octavia does not tell it with bitterness. She tells it as if it happened to someone else, a character in a distant tale. The young woman listens, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, her mind elsewhere. Phoebe moves to the women's warm room to check the water levels. She dips her hand into the pool, feeling the temperature. It is perfect, neither too hot nor too cold. She adds a few drops of lavender oil, watching the purple swirls spread across the surface. The scent rises, soft and calming. A woman sitting nearby inhales deeply and smiles. Phoebe feels a quiet satisfaction. The small things matter here. A perfect bath, a pleasant fragrance, a gentle touch. These are the threads that hold the day together. Outside, the sun begins to sink behind the hills. The sky turns a deep orange, then purple, then a soft gray. The streets of the city grow quieter. The carts stop rumbling. The vendors pack up their wares. But inside the bathhouse, life continues. Oil lamps are lit, their flames casting flickering shadows on the walls. The steam gleams in the orange light, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere. A musician arrives, a young man with a lyre, and takes his place in the corner of the frigidarium. He begins to play a slow, melancholic tune, the notes drifting through the rooms like smoke. The patrons pause, their conversations softening, their bodies relaxing into the music. Phoebe leans against a column, listening. She does not know the song, but it feels ancient, as old as the stones around her. It speaks of loss and longing, of journeys and returns. She thinks of her mother, but the memory is fading now, like a fresco worn by water. She cannot picture her face clearly anymore, only the sound of her voice, a lullaby hummed in the dark. She closes her eyes and lets the music wash over her. For a moment, she is not a slave. She is just a girl listening to a song. The evening patrons arrive, more refined than the afternoon crowd. They come in pairs, in small groups, dressed in fine fabrics, their hair perfumed, their manners polished. They greet each other with elaborate gestures, exchanging gossip about the latest chariot races, about a scandal in the imperial court. The workers move among them like ghosts, refilling wine cups, offering towels, adjusting the temperature of the pools. The Capsarius Gaius stands near the entrance, his eyes watchful, but his expression neutral. He sees a man slip a purse into a woman's hand, a secret payment for a private room. He looks away. It is not his business. A commotion rises near the warm room. A young man, drunk on cheap wine, has stumbled and knocked over a tray of oil flasks. The glass shatters, the oil spills, and the man curses loudly. The workers rush to clean it up, their movements swift and practiced. Gaius approaches the drunk man, his voice low and firm. He guides him to a bench, makes him sit, and offers him a cup of cold water. The man mutters apologies, his head drooping. The other patrons watch, some amused, some annoyed. The incident is over in minutes, absorbed into the rhythm of the evening. Lyre player resumes his song, and the bathhouse returns to its gentle hum. Phoebe helps sweep up the broken glass, careful to avoid the shards. She wraps them in a cloth and carries them to the storage room, where they will be melted down and reused. Nothing here is wasted. Every drop of oil, every piece of cloth, every broken shard has a purpose. The bathhouse is a machine of efficiency, driven by the labor of those who live in its shadow. She places the wrapped glass in a basket and straightens her tunic. Her hands are calloused now, her feet hardened from hours of walking on stone. She is 12 years old, but she feels much older. The bathhouse has aged her, shaped her, made her into something practical and resilient. Midnight approaches. The last patrons leave, their voices fading into the darkness. The workers begin the closing rituals, the slow process of cleaning and preparing for the next day. The pools are drained, the floors scrubbed, the oil lamps extinguished one by one. Marcus lets the furnace burn low, the embers glowing like distant stars. The cook Vibia wraps the leftover food in cloth, storing it for the morning. The masseuse Livia rubs ointment on her aching hands, her face tired but peaceful. The hair plucker Octavia counts her tips, a small pile of coins that she will hide under her mattress. The Capsarius Gaius does a final round, checking the locks on the doors, making sure no one has been left behind. The young slave Aulus curls up in a corner of the warm room, too exhausted to walk to his sleeping quarters. Phoebe covers him with a thin blanket and leaves him there. The workers' sleeping quarters are a small, cramped room behind the kitchen, with low wooden bunks stacked 3 high. There is no window, only a single oil lamp that burns all night. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, of the unwashed bodies of too many people in too small a space. Phoebe climbs into her bunk, the straw mattress rough against her skin. She can hear the others breathing, some snoring, some murmuring in their sleep. She lies on her back, staring at the wooden slats above her. The day plays back in her mind, a series of images: the old man's smile, the drunk man's apology, the taste of dried fig, the sound of the lyre. She tries to hold onto the music, to let it carry her into sleep. But sleep does not come easily. Her body aches, her mind still alert. She thinks about the coin in her belt, the one the old man gave her. She reaches down, touches it, feels its warmth. She imagines a future where she has enough coins to buy her freedom. She does not know how many that would be, but she knows it is a number far beyond her reach. Still, the coin is a start. It is a tiny star in a vast dark sky. She holds onto that image as her eyes grow heavy. In the room next to her, a baby begins to cry. It is the child of one of the women workers, a nursemaid who brings her infant to the bathhouse, because she has no one else to care for it. The cry is thin, weary, a sound that has become familiar to all of them. Someone shushes it, and the crying subsides, replaced by a soft whimpering. Phoebe turns on her side, pulling the thin blanket over her head. The darkness is complete, and the silence grows deeper. The furnace in the basement continues to breathe, a low, steady hum. The water in the pipes cools slowly, the steam fading into droplets that cling to the walls. The bathhouse settles into its nightly rest, its stone bones cooling, its hearth sighing. The city around it sleeps, the streets empty, the stars bright overhead. In the workers' quarters, the bodies of the slaves and the freedmen and the poor lie tangled together, their dreams as varied as their days. Some dream of freedom, some of revenge, some of a warm meal. Phoebe dreams of nothing. She sinks into a dreamless sleep, the deepest gift of exhaustion. When she wakes, it is still dark. The oil lamp has burned low, casting long shadows. She hears movement, someone rising for the early morning shift. It is Vibia, who needs to start the bread. Phoebe listens to her soft footsteps, the creak of the door, the clatter of pots in the kitchen. The routine begins again, the endless cycle of water and fire and steam. She closes her eyes for another moment, savoring the last traces of warmth, the last seconds of rest. Then she swings her legs over the side of the bunk and stands, her feet finding the cold floor. The day begins again, as it always does. The workers gather in the kitchen for a quick breakfast, a piece of bread, and a cup of watered wine. The stoker Marcus is already at the furnace, poking the embers, adding fresh wood. The water in the pipes begins to warm, the first wisps of steam rising. The patrons have not arrived yet, but the bathhouse is already alive, its heart beating in the flame, its breath in the steam. Phoebe wipes her face with a damp cloth and takes a deep breath. She does not know what this day will bring. Perhaps a generous tip, perhaps a harsh word, perhaps a moment of unexpected kindness. She has learned not to expect anything, to take each moment as it comes. She walks into the frigidarium, where the morning light is just beginning to filter through the high windows, pale and soft. She straightens a towel, adjusts a strigil, and waits. The first patron will arrive soon, and then the next, and the next, a river of people flowing through the bathhouse, their stories merging with hers. She will be there, a quiet presence, a small part of a much larger world. And when the night comes again, she will sleep and dream and wake to do it all over again. This is her life, and in its slow, unhurried rhythm, she has found a strange kind of peace. The first patron arrives just as the sun begins to climb over the tiled rooftops of the city, a pale orange glow that spills through the high windows of the frigidarium. He is an old man, older than the one who gave Phoebe the coin, his back bent, his steps slow and deliberate. He carries a small wooden cane and wears a threadbare tunic that has been patched many times. Phoebe recognizes him. He comes every morning, always the first, always alone. He nods at her as he enters, a silent greeting that has become a ritual between them. She returns the nod, and gestures toward the warm room, knowing that he prefers to ease into the heat slowly, his old bones needing time to adjust. She helps him remove his tunic, careful not to pull too hard on the worn fabric. He stands naked and frail, his skin as thin as parchment, covered in the map lines of a long life. She takes his tunic and hangs it on a wooden peg, then offers him a towel, which he accepts with a grateful smile. He shuffles toward the warm room, his cane tapping against the stone floor, and disappears into the mist. Phoebe watches him go, a small pang of tenderness in her chest. She does not know his story, but she imagines he has outlived his wife, his children, perhaps even his grandchildren. The bathhouse is his refuge, his last remaining pleasure in a world that has grown quiet and empty. The morning unfolds in its familiar pattern. A few more patrons trickle in. A baker with flour still dusting his hands. A merchant who haggles over the price of a massage. A young woman who appears to be a slave from a wealthy household, sent to fetch hot water for her mistress. Phoebe fetches the water, filling a bronze vessel and wrapping it in cloth so the woman can carry it without burning her hands. The woman thanks her in a whisper, her eyes downcast, and hurries away. Phoebe wonders if that slave ever gets to bathe herself, or if she spends her days serving others, always warm but never clean, always surrounded by water, but never able to sink into it. The morning light grows stronger, and the bathhouse fills with the low murmur of voices, the splash of water, the hiss of steam. The stoker Marcus emerges from the basement, his face smudged with soot, his arms glistening with sweat. He pours himself a cup of water and leans against the wall, catching his breath. Phoebe brings him a piece of bread, and he nods his thanks, eating in silence. They do not need to speak. They understand each other in the way of people who share the same air, the same heat, the same exhaustion. He is a freedman, she knows, a man who bought his own freedom after 20 years of slavery. He still works in the bathhouse because it is all he knows, because the furnace has become a part of him, its rhythm beating in his blood. A commotion near the entrance draws Phoebe's attention. A group of young men has arrived, laughing too loudly, their voices echoing off the marble walls. They are obviously wealthy, their tunics dyed in bright colors, their hair oiled and perfumed. They demand the best oils, the hottest pools, the most attentive service. The other workers exchange glances, a silent acknowledgement of the extra effort these patrons will require. The masseuse Livia sighs and rolls her shoulders, preparing for the inevitable demands. The hair plucker Octavia mutters something under her breath, her fingers tightening around her tweezers. Phoebe approaches them with a tray of cups, offering water mixed with honey and wine. One of the young men, a red-faced youth with a gold ring on every finger, grabs a cup without looking at her, his hand brushing hers carelessly. She steps back, her expression neutral. Another young man, the quietest of the group, catches her eye and offers a small smile, a flicker of kindness in the midst of the noise. She smiles back, just barely, and then turns away. She has learned that small kindnesses are like coins, precious and rare, and that they should be held close not spent recklessly. The morning rolls into afternoon, and the heat grows oppressive. The sun beats down on the roof of the bathhouse, turning the inside into a steam oven. The workers move more slowly, their movements deliberate, conserving their energy. The cook Vibia brings out trays of cold fruit, sliced melons and grapes, and the patrons eat them lazily, lying on marble benches, their eyes closed. The lyre player, a young man with a thin beard, begins a slow, melancholy melody, a tune that seems to float on the steam, wrapping around the room like a gentle fog. Phoebe finds herself swaying slightly, the music seeping into her bones. She thinks about the baby who cried in the night, the nursemaid's child. She saw the woman earlier, sitting in a corner of the kitchen, the infant at her breast, her face weary but tender. The baby is a few months old, too young to understand the world it has been born into. It will grow up in the shadows of the bathhouse, learning the sounds of water and fire before it learns its own name. Phoebe does not know if that is a sad thing or a hopeful one. Perhaps it is both, like everything else in this place. The afternoon drifts on, a river of time that moves slowly but never stops. A child runs through the warm room, chasing a stray kitten that has wandered in from the street. The workers laugh, a rare sound, and the child's mother scolds him gently, but even she is smiling. The old man with the cane emerges from the steam, his face pink and relaxed. He sits on a bench, and Phoebe brings him a cup of cold water. He drinks it slowly, his eyes closed, and then he reaches out and touches her hand. His palm is rough, his fingers trembling, but the touch is soft, almost feather-light. She looks at him, and he whispers something she cannot hear, a word that might be a blessing or a prayer. He rises and shuffles toward the exit, his cane tapping one last time before he disappears into the afternoon sun. Phoebe watches him go, and she feels a strange heaviness in her chest. She does not know why, but she senses that she will not see him again. Perhaps he has gone home to die, or perhaps he will be back tomorrow, as he always is. She cannot tell, and she learns not to dwell on it. The bathhouse does not allow for dwelling. The moment passes, and there is another task, another patron, another cup to fill. As the day wears on, the patrons thin out, leaving only a few stragglers. The workers take their own rest, a brief respite before the evening crowd. Phoebe sits on the floor of the warm room, her back against the wall, her eyes closed. She can hear the furnace breathing, the water sighing in the pipes, the distant rumble of a cart on the street outside. The sounds blend into a kind of lullaby, a song of the city and the stone. She drifts, not quite asleep, not quite awake, suspended in a warm, dreamy haze. Vibia comes to sit beside her, offering a slice of melon. Phoebe takes it, eating slowly, the sweet juice running down her chin. Vibia does not say anything, but her presence is comforting, a silent companionship that does not require words. They have worked together for years, and they know each other's moods, each other's pains. They have shared meals and griefs and small victories. They are not friends in the way of people who laugh and talk, but they are bound by something deeper, something nameless and steady. The evening begins to gather, the light outside shifting from gold to amber to violet. The workers rise from their rest, preparing for the second wave of patrons. The torches are lit, the pools refreshed, the towels folded. The cook Vibia stokes the fire and begins to warm the evening meal, a stew of lentils and vegetables, with a few scraps of meat for flavor. The smell drifts through the bathhouse, mingling with the steam, and the workers' stomachs growl. They will eat in shifts, a quick bowl of stew standing at the counter, their eyes on the door. The evening patrons arrive, as they always do. They are different from the morning crowd, more refined, more restless. They come to see and be seen, to conduct business, to flirt and scheme. The workers move among them like shadows, invisible but essential. Phoebe refills a wine cup, and a woman with painted lips catches her eye and says something sharp, a complaint about the temperature of the water. Phoebe nods and adjusts the valve, though she knows the water is fine. Some patrons just want to complain, and it is easier to let them have their small victories. A man in a toga, his face flushed with drink, staggers toward the cold pool, intending to plunge in. The Capsarius Gaius intercepts him gently, guiding him to a bench, explaining that the cold shock might be dangerous in his state. The man grumbles, but submits, and Gaius brings him a cup of water, which he drinks reluctantly. Phoebe watches the exchange, admiring Gaius's patience. He has been doing this work for decades, and he has seen every kind of foolishness, every kind of vulnerability. He treats them all with the same calm, steady hand, as if they were children who have wandered too close to a fire. The night deepens, and the bathhouse grows quiet again. The last patrons leave, their laughter echoing down the street before fading into the darkness. The workers begin the closing rituals, the same movements they have performed 1,000 times. The pools are drained, the floors scrubbed, the oil lamps extinguished. The furnace is banked, the embers glowing like the last coals of a dying star. The cook Vibia wraps the leftover stew in cloth, saving it for the morning. The masseuse Livia rubs ointment on her hands, her fingers swollen and tender. The hair plucker Octavia counts her tips, a small pile of coins that she will hide in her shoe. Phoebe helps sweep the floors, the broom moving in slow, even strokes. She thinks about the old man who may not return, the baby who cried, the young man who smiled. She thinks about the coin in her belt, still warm, still heavy. She does not know what tomorrow will bring, but she knows that tomorrow will come, and she will be here, in the steam and the stone, doing what she has always done. The workers gather in the kitchen for their own meal, a quiet affair. They eat in silence, too tired for words. The stew is warm and filling, and they dip their bread into it, savoring the simple flavor. The young slave Aulus falls asleep with his head on the table, and no one wakes him. The nursemaid's baby is quiet, sleeping in a basket near the fire. Moment is peaceful, a pocket of calm in the endless cycle of work. Phoebe finishes her stew and rinses her bowl in a bucket of water. She climbs into her bunk, the the straw mattress familiar and rough. She lies on her back, staring at the wooden slats above her. The oil lamp flickers, casting shifting shadows on the ceiling. She can hear the others breathing, the soft rustle of blankets, the distant hiss of the furnace. She closes her eyes, and the day dissolves into a blur of images, sounds, sensations. She does not try to hold on to them. She lets them go, one by one. Sleep comes slowly, a tide that rises and falls. She dreams of water, vast and clear, a sea that stretches to the horizon. She is swimming in it, weightless, her arms moving in long, effortless strokes. The water is warm, the sun gentle on her face. There is no steam, no furnace, no crowded room. There is only the water and the sky and the quiet rhythm of her breath. She drifts, suspended in that dream, and the world beyond fades into nothing. When she wakes, it is still dark. The oil lamp has burned out, and the room is silent. She lies still, listening to the absence of sound. For a moment, she does not know where she is or who she is. Then the familiar ache in her bones returns, the smell of sweat and stone, and she remembers. She is Phoebe. She is a worker in the bathhouse. She is a girl with a coin in her belt and a dream of a sea that does not end. She closes her eyes, and she does not think about the morning. She does not think about the patrons, or the heat, or the endless cycle of water and fire. She thinks about the water in her dream, the way it held her, the way it let her float. She holds onto that feeling as she sinks back into sleep, the deepest kind, the kind that comes only after a long day of honest work. The bathhouse settles into the small hours of the night. The furnace breathes its low, steady breath. The water in the pipes cools, drop by drop. The stone walls contract, sighing as the temperature falls. The city outside is quiet, the stars bright and cold. In the workers' quarters, the bodies of the slaves and the freedmen and the poor lie tangled together, breathing in and out, each breath a tiny affirmation of life. They do not dream of freedom or fortune. They dream of sleep, and they sleep deeply. And for a few hours, the world is soft and silent and kind. And somewhere in the steam and the stone, the heat and the water, the story of the bathhouse continues, as it has for centuries, as it will for centuries more. The workers come and go, some to freedom, some to death, some to an unknown place beyond the walls. But the bathhouse remains, its heart beating in the flame, its breath in the steam, its soul in the hands of those who tend it, day after day, night after night, in the quiet, endless rhythm of water and fire and time. Phoebe sleeps, and she does not count the hours. She does not count the days. She simply sleeps, and the morning will come, and she will rise, and she will work, and she will live, and that is enough. That is more than enough. It is everything. It is everything. And yet it is also nothing. The night stretches on, a vast, dark ocean of time, and Phoebe floats upon it without direction, without desire. The dream returns, but it changes, shifts like water. She is no longer swimming in the warm sea. She is standing in the bathhouse, but it is empty, the pool still, the steam gone. The torches are unlit, and the only light comes from a small crack in the ceiling, a thin beam of moonlight. She walks across the cold tiles, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The furnace is cold, the ash gray and still. She reaches out and touches the stone wall, and it is cool against her palm, the first time she has ever felt it without the heat of the day. She does not know what this dream means, if it means anything at all. Perhaps it is only the mind's way of resting, of letting go of the weight of the waking world. She wanders through the empty rooms, the changing room with its rows of empty niches, the warm room where the benches sit vacant, the hot room where the steam once hung thick and heavy. She climbs the steps to the roof, and the sky is clear, the stars scattered like grains of salt. She lies down on the flat stones, and the cool air washes over her. She closes her eyes, and she is still, perfectly still, as if she has become part of the building itself. And then the dream dissolves, and she is in her bunk again, her body heavy and warm beneath the thin blanket. The oil lamp has been relit, she notices, a small flame flickering in the corner. She does not know who lit it. Perhaps one of the other workers, rising to use the latrine or check on the baby. She listens to the breathing around her, the slow, rhythmic sound of sleep. The baby stirs and coos softly, then settles again. The nursemaid shifts in her bunk, murmuring something in her sleep, a word or a name that Phoebe cannot quite catch. The night is a long, gentle tunnel. There is no rush, no urgency. The hours pass like water through a sieve, slow and steady. She thinks about the old man, and she hopes he made it home safely. She thinks about the young man with the shy smile, and she wonders if he will come again. She thinks about the woman with the painted lips, and she feels a small, distant pity for her, for the sharpness that comes from a life of wanting. She does not judge. She only observes, like the moon watching the tides. The sky outside begins to pale, a soft gray seeping through the small window near the ceiling. It is the hour before dawn, the quietest time in the city. Even the birds are still asleep. The bathhouse holds its breath. Phoebe feels the stirring of the others, the subtle shift in the air as they begin to wake, one by one. The young slave Alice groans and rolls over, his face pressed into his pillow. The cook Vibia stretches and yawns, the sound muffled by her hand. The masseuse Livia sits up slowly, rubbing her eyes. Phoebe does not move. She lies still, savoring the last moments of rest. She knows that soon the routine will begin again. The furnace will be stoked, the water heated, the floors swept. The first patrons will arrive, the early risers, the old men, the night workers who come to wash off the hours before sleeping. She will fill her bucket, pick up her cloth, and begin her work. She will move through the rooms, wiping and scrubbing, her hands in the water, her eyes on the patrons. She will be invisible, and she will be essential. But for now, she is still. She is a girl in the dark, wrapped in a thin blanket, her head resting on a straw pillow. The smell of the bathhouse is familiar, almost sweet now, a blend of damp stone, wood smoke, and the faint, clean scent of the hot water. She breathes it in, and it feels like home. It is not the home she might have imagined as a child, a small house with a garden and a door that locks. But it is home nonetheless, the only one she knows. The light grows stronger, and the room begins to take shape. The wooden slats above her, the chipped plaster on the walls, the pile of towels in the corner. The cook Fibia is already on her feet, stirring the embers in the furnace. Alice has woken and is splashing water on his face. The nursemaid is feeding the baby, humming a soft, tuneless song. Phoebe sits up, her bones protesting. She swings her legs over the edge of the bunk and places her feet on the cold floor. She stands, stretches, her arms reaching toward the ceiling. She pulls her tunic over her head, straightens it, and runs her fingers through her hair. She does not look in a mirror. There is no mirror in the workers' quarters. She does not need one. She walks into the main hall, and the steam is already beginning to rise. The first rays of sunlight stream through the high windows, catching the particles of dust and water vapor, turning them into tiny, shimmering specks. The bathhouse is awakening, its stone heart beating once more. Phoebe picks up her bucket and her cloth. She takes a deep breath, feeling the familiar heat on her skin. The morning has come, and she is ready. She steps into the warm room first, where the morning light slants across the tiles like honey. The air is still cool, but the furnace is already breathing life into the pipes, and she can feel the faint pulse of heat through the soles of her feet. She dips her cloth into the bucket, wrings it out, and begins to wipe down the benches. The wood is smooth and worn, polished by countless bodies. She works slowly, methodically, her mind quiet. The motions are familiar, soothing, like a prayer she does not need to speak aloud. The young slave Alice joins her, his own bucket sloshing. He is still sleepy, his eyes half closed, but he works without complaint. They do not speak. There is no need. The rhythm of the morning is its own language, a shared understanding that words would only break. She moves to the hot room, where the tiles are already warm beneath her knees. She scrubs the corners, where the damp tends to gather, where the mold creeps in if left unchecked. It is a small thing, but she takes pride in it. The bathhouse must be clean. It must be a place of rest, not of rot. The first patron arrives as the sun climbs higher, an old man with a walking stick and a quiet cough. He nods to Phoebe as he passes, a gesture of recognition. She nods back. He has been coming for years, she knows. He has seen workers come and go. He does not ask for much, just a corner of the warm room and a cup of water. Phoebe brings him the water without being asked. He thanks her with a smile that shows missing teeth, and she feels a small warmth in her chest, a sense of purpose that has nothing to do with coin. The morning unfolds slowly, like a scroll being unrolled. The bathhouse fills and empties and fills again. Phoebe moves through the rooms, her feet silent on the tiles. She refills the oil lamps, straightens the towels, empties the basins of cold water. She catches snippets of conversation, fragments of lives that are not her own. A woman complaining about her husband, a boy boasting about a race, a merchant negotiating a price. She does not listen closely. She lets the words wash over her like the steam itself. At midday, the cook Fibia brings a bowl of bread and olives, and Phoebe eats sitting on the steps of the cold plunge, the only place where the air is still fresh. She breaks the bread with her fingers, dips it in the oil, chews slowly. She watches the light shift on the water in the pool, the ripples catching the sun. For a moment, she is not a worker. She is simply a girl, sitting in the quiet, eating a simple meal. It is a small blessing, and she holds it close. The afternoon is busier, the heat of the day drawing more people in. Phoebe works without pause, her body moving on its own. The furnace roars, the pipes gurgle, the voices of the patrons rise and fall like waves. She is part of it all, a single thread in a vast tapestry. She does not think about the future. She does not think about the past. She is only here in the steam and the stone, her hands in the water, her heart beating in time with the fire. As the sun begins to set, the crowds thin. The light through the high windows turns gold, then amber, then a soft, dusty orange. Phoebe slows her pace. She wipes down the last bench, empties her bucket, and hangs her cloth to dry. She stands in the center of the empty, warm room, the heat rising around her like a blanket. The day is done. The work is finished. She is tired, but it is a good tired, the kind that settles deep in the bones and promises a restful sleep. She returns to the workers' quarters, where the others are already gathering. The cook Vibia is stirring a pot of stew. Alice is lying on his bunk, staring at the ceiling. The baby is asleep in the nursemaid's arms. The oil lamp flickers, casting shadows on the walls. Phoebe finds her bunk, sits down, and slowly unlaces her sandals. She places them beside the bed, side by side. She lies back, the straw pillow soft beneath her head. She does not dream of the sea tonight. She does not dream at all. Sleep comes for her like a quiet tide, pulling her under without a sound. And in the darkness of the bathhouse, in the warmth of the sleeping bodies around her, she is at peace. The world outside continues, the city of stone and ambition, of emperors and slaves, of baths and bread. But here, in this small room, there is only the slow, steady breath of those who have given their bodies to the day, and now give them to the night. The bathhouse settles. The furnace cools. The water stills. And the story of Phoebe, and of all the nameless ones who kept the steam rising and the stone warm, goes on, not in the pages of history, but in the quiet rhythm of work and rest, of fire and water, of waking and sleeping, in the endless, gentle cycle that holds the world together, even when no one is left to remember.